Welcome. This is the Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Scarlett. Here, we go over the realities of being an entrepreneur, all the ups and the downs, the nitty-gritty, mistakes, lessons learned, and all the successes. Remember to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. All right, let's get into it. Welcome to another episode of the Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. Today we have Lee Kearney in the studio with us. Thank you for joining us, Lee.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Lee is I don't even know. Would you consider yourself a real estate mogul at this point?
We've definitely gone through cycles, and that's one thing I think we'll get into. We've ramped up to enormous levels, and then we've had to contract. And I think that's one of the core concepts I try to teach people, that you look at the market, you look at the opportunity, and you tailor your business around that instead of just going full force against the market or with a strategy that's not in line with the market. So we've expanded and contracted and changed its strategy over the years to adapt to what the market's doing and where the actual opportunity is.
Yeah, that's really good. We're going to talk a lot about that, I think. But in short, Lee is a very, very successful real estate professional. He's been doing this for a long time. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Lee, and what got you into real estate to start with.
Well, I actually started real estate by accident in 2003. I bought a condo back in Ireland, where I'm from. It was a penthouse. I think it paid about €250,000, which is pretty decent for back then. This was, 23 years ago, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a pretty decent amount.
But I got broken into while I was at work, and I didn't feel safe. So I just decided to sell that place. And what was interesting, my base salary was about €30,000 plus commission. So end up around 100, but the base was 30. I ended up selling that condo in 3 months, made about €35,000. And I said, why am I working? And so I bought something at retail, sold it, and made money. And so I was hooked at real estate at that point. And I decided to quit my job, go back to school to finish my master's in 2004, moved to California. Probably one of the first lessons, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But at church, I found a guy who did real estate. And I said, can you teach me about real estate? And I realized early on, like, the only dumb question is the one you don't ask. And I said, I'll help you. I'll go to Home Depot. So I'd go to Home Depot, we're throwing bags of mulch out, but I was learning real estate with him. And so he basically taught me how to buy in a certain pocket of San Bernardino, certain price point. He said, look for, I didn't even know what a probate was. He's like, buy a probate. So I hired his agent and said, I need to buy a probate. I had no idea what it was, but I knew I needed to find one. Ended up driving around looking at properties for 4 months, finally found a property, probate, for about $132,000. I actually have it pinned in my office because it was my very first real estate deal. Made my first mistake on that real estate deal. I moved into the house and rehabbed it. So I'm literally skipping around rooms trying to rehab around myself. So it took 3 months, when there was actually about a month's worth of work. Put it on the market, did exactly what my coach, mentor, whatever you want to call him, basically the guy who guided me, which is, I'd highly recommend that. I mean, trying to do it alone, now I've realized it's a village sport, and I try to do all deals with a bunch of people, but I was trying to do it solo, except I did make a good move hiring him, but the mistake was living in the house. Anyway, put out 50 signs, a bunch of people came. This guy walked up and said, I want to buy this house. And I'll never forget, the day before closing, he said, I read that there's somebody died in the house. And he goes, are there ghosts in the house? And I thought really careful. I'm like, what am I going to tell this guy? So I said, Jose, this house is 100% ghost free. He says, I'll close. And so we closed.
That's hilarious.
Made about 32,000, 34,000. Bought it for 132, sold for 184. Again, I was hooked. I'm like, man, I just did two in a row.
Yeah.
Bought my second house in California, and I made my second and third mistake on my second house. So I moved back to Florida, tried to rehab the house remotely. Didn't have the systems and process in place. So that was a disaster. And my third mistake was I hired a friend. And so it was a 1 month job that took about 6 months and a lot of tension.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, by the time we put that house on the market in 2005, the market was already slipping in California. The cracks in the armor were already there. So I think I got out the back door with 10 or 12 grand in profit. It was a higher price point, but a lot less profit, maybe like a 5% net profit. Dodged a bullet. Finished off my master's in 2005. And while I was going to school, I asked actually my friend's father at church, I said, how do I make money in real estate? He goes, you buy foreclosures. I'm like, well, what's a foreclosure? And he said, well, people lose their house to the bank and the county foreclose them. I'm like, well, how do I buy those? And he said, they're at the courthouse. I said, where's the courthouse? So he gave me the address and said at 2:00 every day, there's an auction. So I showed up at the auction. It looks like a bunch of used car salesmen, and they're auctioning off numbers. There was no addresses, just like case number, and people are raising their hand and people are looking at each other and it looked like there's deals being made. And I'm just sitting going,
What's going
on?
Yeah.
So I went there for a couple weeks because I believe in learning something and testing. And so I didn't feel comfortable buying a case number because I had no idea what it was. And this lady came up and her name was Tamara. And she said, would you like to buy one of my books? And I said, what's in your book? She goes, well, I turn all the case numbers that are upcoming into addresses and give you all the details and how much is owed. And I said, that's fantastic.
Yes. Yeah.
So of course I said yes. And it was very reasonable, $200 a month or something like that. And so then I started driving properties in the morning, or if I had school that morning, I'd drive them after the auction and get ahead of what was coming up.
Yeah.
And so I remember I bought my first house and I was $7,000 and I bought the house. I didn't even know what I bought, but apparently I bought a homeowner's lien for $7,000. It was subject to a mortgage. Sometimes not knowing any better is better. So I skip traced the owner. And I said, hey, I need your social security number so I can log in and see your mortgage balance before I fund the foreclosure tomorrow. He gave it to me.
Oh, wow.
So I got in.
Wow.
It was owed $140,000, which, by the way, I lucked out. $7,000 for the homeowners. Put about $15,000 plus a lot of nights after school and after the auction just painting this house, and sold it for $210,000. And so, again, I'm thinking, man, I'm the Midas touch here.
Yeah.
So that kind of continued 2005, 2006. Then the market started, and I started buying some rentals and just getting into everything. That's one of the mistakes that people make is you try to do everything at once.
Yeah.
And so the market was going the complete opposite direction.
Actually, let me pause you there for a second because you mentioned something about doing everything at once. And I was actually thinking as you were talking, I was like, okay, you've gone from just starting out, flipping, probate, foreclosures, and property liens. Like most people, that's not how they start in properties. They might flip their own house, or house hack it or something like that. You went, I would say, almost professional mode instantly.
Well, that was where I was guided. Like I said, the question I'd ask is, where do I make money? It was foreclosures. And interesting enough, I was bootlegging this with credit cards and cash advances. So I'd buy something at the courthouse and go down and slap down 3 or 4 credit cards and get a cash advance for what I just paid for the property and get a cashier's check for $150,000 from credit card advances. And back then they were doing a lot of 6 months interest free. So I'd have the house flipped before I even had to pay.
That's incredible.
So I was paying 3%. It's cheapest hard money in town.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, but where there's a will, there's a way, and I was determined to succeed. So I woke up at the end of 2007 with 11 upside down rentals and flips I couldn't sell. I realized the market's shifted because I was so busy focused on my strategy and not looking at the market and not actually understanding where the opportunity was. And I'll kind of give you a sneak preview, which is 2 of the biggest lessons I've learned, but I want to go into more detail at the end. There's always money in real estate, but you have to be on the right side of the trade.
I love that.
And there's a time to buy real estate and there's a time to control it. You buy at the bottom, you control at the top. And I was busy buying at the top. I got decimated. So 2008, as we all know, financial collapse, I lost everything. So I made and lost millions of dollars in those first couple of years, had to start fresh. And I said, okay, well, now that I know there's always money in real estate, now that I know that you got to be on the right side of the trade, and I realized wholesalers are driving around in Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Hummers and you name it. And the economy's collapsed. It was like Miami in the 80s. So I said, what's going on here? And I realized that they were controlling real estate and batting up the deals for investors and just pulling their money up front. So essentially a wholesaler passes all the risk to the buyer because they collect their fee up front. Yeah. So I decided to go full force into wholesaling. But I said, okay, I made money in the distressed market. And I was buying essentially from the banks or at the auctions. I said, where's the opportunity? And I realized that there was the REO market was getting flooded. So the distressed seller in town was not the homeowner, it was the bank. Yeah. So I decided to this is another lesson I learned. If you want to beat your competition, be better. So I developed a system where something was listed on the MLS. In less than 5 minutes, we'd have a full package put together, including addendums, sent to the agent, and they get both sides of the commission because all my competition was taking their side of the commission. So who do you think got all the deals?
Yeah.
Me.
How are you doing that in 5 minutes?
Because
Just automations?
Because I'd set up email notifications. There were very, very specific notifications for specific zip code, for specific asset types. And as soon as it hit, it would email me right away. And I had an admin person. The only job was to look at the attachments that were unique to that bank and fill out. We had the forms 80% filled out. And again, it's not the same now with ChatGPT and Claude and all the other cool stuff we have. But we were able to assemble that package. And then the other key thing was I asked the agents, I said, I actually met with the top 20 real estate agents. I hunted them all down for lunch. And I said, what can I do to buy all of your deals? They said, well, everyone else takes commission. I said, you get both sides. So I gave up whatever it was, 3% in every deal, but I got 80% of the deals. Yeah. And so I was the most reliable. And then the other thing too is we closed on everything. Even if I was going to lose money, I made sure we closed. So
there's a lesson in that right there. It's like reputation matters more than money.
Fast forward a couple of years later, I bought 1,000 deals from one brokerage. Yeah, we were just really, and they weren't huge deals, but we're making 5-10 grand a deal. So I say this, lost everything in 2008, made $1 million the following year by switching strategy in one of the worst markets in
that is impressive.
U.S. real estate.
I think the thing that's most impressive about that is the speed that you pivoted, though. Like that things went down, things went sour in 2007, and you instantly recognized where things were going and you moved to where it was going. Like I think a lot of people got wiped out in 2007. That's a very common story, or 2007, 2008, that window. Not many of them looked at the foreclosures coming in to the market and said, the people who are really in distress right now are the banks. Let me focus on creating my strategy around that. That's impressive.
So when I look back the last 22 years in real estate, I've realized one thing. It's always, the best opportunities always exist in the distressed market. The seller changes. So when there's equity, your homeowner is your seller. When there's no equity and the homeowners are sidelined, it's short sales, which ultimately the bank need to approve. Yeah. At the auction, which the bank's selling, or after the auction, the REOs. Yeah. So the seller just shifts, the distressed seller becomes the bank, who's in the business of lending money, not owning real estate. But the game has never changed. It's always around the distressed market. You want the best deals, find the most distressed seller, and the deal will follow that typically.
That is great advice. Okay, so things were going really well. You are now in the process of doing foreclosures.
Correct. Yeah. So we started buying bank-owned properties, and then I realized the auction platform. So the banks had pivoted away from the MLS, and we're starting to list on auction.com and Zome. So then we said, okay, how do we set up our system? So we set up sheets about a week in advance on every single property that was coming on every platform that was not the MLS. And I hired someone to just live bid on every asset on every platform that we wanted to buy. Yeah. And so we end up, at one point we're getting 5-10 deals a week just from one platform. I was flown out to Texas to meet with them to figure out like how we could make the buyer experience better and all that stuff. But again, we became a specialist. And that's the other piece of advice to give people: become really good at one thing. A lot of people skip around real estate. Like, oh, I'm going to start flipping house. What does that even mean? Yeah. That's just thought. It's an idea. It's not actually a goal. I'm going to buy rentals. What does that mean? How many rentals, where, what price point, who you're going to put in the, where, how are you going to rehab them so you don't have problems? Yep. We had a really defined strategy, which is we're just going to wholesale houses, but if they're not being listed on the MLS and they're being listed on these third-party auction sites, we'll just
go there.
We'll just go there.
Yeah.
So we ran that one for years. And then I realized about 8-9 years ago that inventory is drying up. Why? Because now the homeowners are back in the driver's seat. As prices rise, equity grows, and so you don't have many people getting foreclosed on. So then all that inventory dried up, and we said, okay, well, where do we go? We got to go back to the seller, the distressed seller. So then we pivoted, and this was right around COVID, which I kind of skipped over an important period of time. There was pretty nasty divorce, which wiped me out part 2.
Oof.
So
Oh, goodness.
yes. And then we have COVID,
Yeah, which
was
three.
wiped me out part
Yeah.
3. So I'm on round 4 of this. So the good news is I know how to make money and how to earn and how to pivot with opportunities and pivot with the market. But yeah, there's definitely been several well cycles throughout that period. But I realized the seller control the deal. Then the way is, okay, how do we harness technology to get to those sellers? So we started calling and texting and using a lot of technology to isolate the seller that was most likely to sell us a property at a price that we could pay and make a profit on. So everybody else went after 100%. We would go after 10%, but we'll go all in on that 10%. And I think the basic formula we looked at is highest distress with the highest equity. Because I was trying to push all the odds in my favor. So if I found a deal, there was plenty of money to be made. And if they were really in distress, my solution made sense. Yeah. So we were trying to push all the odds completely in our favor to find really, really profitable deals. And that worked. But then COVID came along and real estate was dead for about 6 months. Yeah. And then it took off again. And then prices just started getting crazy. Oh. So that became a flipper's market again. So instead of wholesaling, we pivoted and started flipping. Because the property would naturally appreciate 2-3% a month doing nothing.
Just by sitting there.
Yeah. So that worked for a couple of years, and then the interest rates rose, and then we got caught so there was a couple of things. The stuff we bought pre-COVID, we were buying a lot of occupied properties from the auction platform. Okay. I got caught holding about $40 million worth of inventory for 2 years. So that crushed us. Yeah. And then the rehabs, we did real well during COVID on that stuff, but it was offset by the occupied properties we couldn't kick people out of. Yeah. And then prices in a lot of areas have leveled down, come down about 20-30%. So now we're redoing the strategy I know works, which is in a risky market, you wholesale. So 90% of what we do is wholesale. If we do rehab, it's cosmetic rehabs. But understanding market cycles, you and I talked before this, what would you say to your younger self? Become a student and ultimately a master of market cycles.
Let me ask you this, for anybody who's considering getting into real estate, a lot of the stuff, now you're not clairvoyant. A lot of that stuff was happening as it was going on, but you were able to astutely recognize how the markets are being impacted. What advice would you give to somebody who's trying to figure out how to start reading the market cycles like that?
Sure. I think, I actually talked a little bit about crypto before this. I said, so when people love Bitcoin, I run away from it. When people talk about how stupid it is and how everybody lost their shirt,
it's time to buy.
I buy it.
Yeah.
And so same thing with real estate. The person bagging your groceries, no disrespect, owns a bunch of rentals. Probably a good time to run away from real estate.
Yeah.
Person cutting your hair has got like 10 rentals.
Yeah.
And that's what was happening back in 2005 and 2006. Because the credit opened up, and that's one of the key drivers. Once the credit opens up, everybody's buying, drives up prices. And plus, I'm a simple guy. You can look at something like the 10-year moving average, and you can see there was just this huge spike. But if you put a ruler, or even eyeball it, you can see the prices are probably still 20-30% overinflated. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people say, there's a national housing shortage, but that's market by market. And even within a market, there's sub-markets within a market.
Yeah.
And so you have to just really look at what's the days on market. Is stuff actually selling? Is stuff sitting around? One of my mentors gave me one of the best advice. He was, you want to know when a market's shifting, a real estate market? And I said, no. Yes. And he said, look for price reduce signs everywhere. And
there you go. Yeah.
Genius.
Simple.
And I remember when I was about 8 years old, I asked my father, I said, what's business? And he said, well, I buy low and I sell high. My next question was, well, why don't they just buy from the same place you're buying from? Because they don't know how. And I was like, this is great. I love business. So anyway, I asked my mentor a similar question, like really kind of a broad question. I said, what drives an economy? And this is a guy worth several $100 million. And he said, spending. He goes, when the economy is doing well, people open up their wallets because they're confident. And that trickles all the way from manufacturing through consumer spending. He goes, when people are scared, they close their wallet. And when they slow down with their spending, that puts the economy in a grinding halt. And I think we're right there, by the way. I think it's a very fractured economy that's hanging on by a thread. Yep. because you talk to the average person, they're
having a hard time.
They're not spending money because all their money is going on groceries, fuel in their car, their car payment, their mortgage payment. And so that's the average person. People are being really honest about it. And so now that we're seeing that, I'm like, okay, the bubble's about to burst again. So we're just going to go back to flipping. We're buying some assets up north, but majority of those are just going to be wholesaled out because we don't want the risk of owning them. We just want to collect our profit and move on. So really, there's 4 things I tell you and everybody else out there. When you're looking at a deal, let's just take one deal, whether it's commercial, single family. What's the profit? A lot of people stop there and they get so blinded by the profit or the potential profit. That's just one piece of the formula. The second thing is, what's the risk? A lot of people don't want to consider that, but did you run your worst case, your best case, your likely case? Is your worst case, the analogy I try to use with risk, try to kill a deal up front. If it survives, maybe you should do the deal. But always try to kill that deal up front. Try to beat it up and make it not work. And if it survives that test, then it's probably a deal. The third thing I would say that people don't look at, which is an intangible, is brain damage. People just don't think about how much brain damage this one deal is going to be, because the amount of mental energy and effort and frustration to make that profit, and that takes up ultimately a finite amount of space in your brain. So if you're walking around angry and frustrated to try to make profit in this one deal, you should really consider that. So the first 3 are profit, risk, brain damage. And the fourth one, which is the biggest cost if people are actually trying to grow a business that most people don't consider, it's the opportunity cost of your time. Because every minute you spend on that deal is a minute you're not spending on another deal. Let's take a rehab and a wholesale deal. Let's go back to my initial analogy. I made 50 grand in a rehab. And then you talk down to someone, well, you only made 20 grand wholesaling.
But the time.
And I say to that person that made 50 grand, how many hours you spend? 150 hours, 200 hours, let's just say. If they're small, they're managing everything themselves. Talk to the wholesaler that made 20 grand. So let's take 100 hours to be super conservative. You made 50 grand. You're talking, what's that per hour?
50 grand in 100 hours.
500
I
bucks.
got the real math.
500
We'll
bucks.
pause right here.
500 bucks an hour.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Talk to the wholesaler, made 20 grand. How long did you spend? 10 hours. Wholesaler's making $2,000 an hour, way more than a doctor and an attorney. My wife's an attorney, and that's pretty. She doesn't make $2,000 an hour. I think her hourly is like $450. And you talk to the rehabber, made $500. Then you start to run the math again and say, okay, you take the opportunity cost of the time, you 10x the wholesalers, you do 10 deals. That's $200,000 in the same amount of time the rehabber made 50 grand. And this is why opportunity cost is a real cost. If you are maximizing your time during the time you've allocated for business, you need to respect your time and understand there's a real cost. And the true cost, which is the biggest cost on all the things we talk about, is your time and the opportunity cost of your time. So that's the 4 things I consider, and I would advise anybody to look at: profit, risk, brain damage, and opportunity cost of your time. I'll sometimes walk away from a deal over brain damage. Alone. I'm like, there's an easier dollar out there. This is going to be a really frustrating dollar. Maybe it's a seller that's terrible to work with, and you know you're going to have to evict them and kick them out of the house, even though they said they're going to leave in 30 days. Or they're 80 years old. I'm like, I'm not kicking out an 80-year-old woman. Like, I know I could make money on this, but I don't want to deal with this. And I think mature business owners recognize, and we talked a little bit before the podcast, your second favorite answer should be no. Learn to say no.
There's a saying. That I've used and I've heard said before, but actually I'm going to start adopting brain damage. I like that better. But it's that the juice isn't always worth the squeeze. You know, sometimes it's just not worth the dollar. You know, just the effort's not worth it. So when you're talking about markets, you mentioned that markets fluctuate, obviously, you know, nationally, but then also within submarkets and then within submarkets of those submarkets. Are you looking? How are you picking the submarkets you're going to play in? Are you going nationwide?
Liquidity. So if we take the stock market, which a lot of people understand, where do day traders hang out?
And options.
Options, but liquid. They stay at liquid stocks.
Yeah.
They want lots of
Volume.
If you have a high volume market, there's plenty of buyers and sellers. So all you got to do is buy at the right price, because you know you're feeding into a liquid market. You're not reinventing the market. You're not trying to beat the market. There's a marketplace that already exists. One of my professors in college during my master's taught me this. When you go into business, you want to get into a business that has an ocean of money. That way you just siphon off your millions of dollars at the bottom. Nobody even knows or cares, because you're dealing with a marketplace that's already built. You're figuring out how to add value to that marketplace, but you're not trying to create a marketplace that doesn't exist. And so liquidity is the number one thing we look at. So Ohio, looking at some properties up there, very liquid market.
Yeah.
The price, but it's all down to price. Yeah. So, but there's an established price point, lots of buyers, lots of sellers. And so I like markets like that. They may not be the sexiest as far as other people go, because people want to buy egotistical real estate. I like this house. I don't care if I like the house or don't like the house or like the apartment building,
the numbers,
or like the office building. Do the numbers work?
Yep.
And also determining your exit up front. One of the biggest mistakes people make, I'm going to buy it because it's a good deal. What are you going to do with it?
That was going to be my next question to you. So when you were talking about all these deals that you're doing, and being able to move in and out, you mentioned that you were stuck on like 40 million in inventory at one point.
Government regulation. You can't kick anybody out. Yeah. I had one agent who lived in a property in Chicago for 2.5 years, just kind of waved at us and said, I'm not getting out. Yeah. Licensed real estate agent. It started off as a $1.2, $1.3 million house. I think we ended up having to sell it for after 2022, when the market started to dip for like $900,000, and we plus had almost 3 years of holding costs and $1 million home.
That's rough.
That's one deal.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay, so I was going to ask that is a risk, especially
buying occupied properties.
Yeah.
From banks, something I don't think we'll do anymore.
Yeah.
Now in Ohio, some of them are occupied if we end up buying that portfolio, but the price is way down.
Yeah. So the risk is lower.
Yeah, 20, 30 cents on the dollar. So
way
risk has been calculated.
Yeah. How are you finding your sellers on like at that scale of volume that you're doing?
It's a lot of networking.
Because you were talking about knowing your exit. So like
asset managers, distressed hedge funds, distressed banks. Typically, it's either like you're going straight to the seller who owns a lot of properties, or you're going to a seller that owns a lot of properties that has a bank that's over leveraged, and then you're putting a distressed seller, because that's your ownership, and then you're talking with the bank to restructure the debt down to a level. So there's two ways of doing it. You either go straight to the owner, who, if it's a hedge fund that raised a bunch of money and then realized you can't manage C or D grade assets in Ohio from a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
You can manage mortgages, you can push paper.
Yeah.
But you get into anything kind of lower than B grade assets, you're into heavy management. It's all down to management and asset management, property preservation, and really, really good systems and processes. Mm-hmm. But there's two ways of doing that. That's again, it's distressed sellers.
Yeah.
I'm looking for people who have a problem. And if there's a problem, my solution makes sense, because it's a low price, quick close, get this hassle.
Fix the problem for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a distressed seller, we'll talk about the high distress, high equity. If someone's losing their house next week, what we found in 90% of cases, there's 3 things that are important to them. 1, stop the sale, first and foremost. So take that pressure off. 2, they need money. And 3, they need time to move.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about someone who's truly a week away from losing their home, those are the 3 things that are actually important. You notice one thing I didn't mention?
Price. Yeah.
90% of the time we're dealing with high distress, we never mention price. We'll tell you, hey, we can get you $20,000 in cash.
And that's enough.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But we do that by asking questions and figuring out what they need. But it's not price. Well, I can get you the most amount of money. No, you're losing your house next week. Yeah. So we got to figure out what's most important to that seller, and then prioritize that, and then solve for that. Yeah.
So when thinking through now, okay, you've explained like how you're getting your inventory in. How are you offloading those properties after you've gotten them in? So how are you finding your buyers?
Sure. So we've determined up front where their exit is. So if it's a wholesale, it'll be pre-marketed through our channels, the off-market channels, and if we're gonna, that's if we're double closing. If we're gonna take it down, the best place to sell is the MLS. The worst place to sell, the worst place to buy is the MLS. Yeah. So because the MLS syndicates with every other website, you don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
Put it out on the largest marketplace that's going to get out to the most amount of buyers. Economics 101 says demand is up, all other things are equal, price goes up. And typically you're going to sell your wholesale deal for 5, 10, 15, even 20% more on the MLS than you will to an off-market buyer's list.
Yeah.
So having the ability to close is huge because the premium typically, if it's a true wholesale exit, will outweigh the friction costs of taking down that property, even with private money, as long as there's a short-term exit on that. Now, if we're going to rehab the house, again, for us, it's got to be 1990 or newer, minimum 3-bedroom, minimum 2-bath, ideally 2-car garage, because now we've opened up an asset type that appeals the most amount of buyers with a rehab variability that's as low as possible, because 1990 or newer cuts out clay piping, galvanized piping, cast iron. It cuts out a lot of electrical issues. Especially after 2000, roofing, framing, all that stuff is quote unquote newer. So if you predict a $50,000 rehab, you might go 55 or 45, but it's not like getting to 1950s home. The pipes are collapsed. You've got cloth wiring, and then you're into from a $50,000 budget to $100,000 like that.
Yep. So you mentioned already, just in the course of this conversation, a couple mistakes that you've made, and it's funny, as you were talking, I haven't done nearly the kind of volume you're talking about, but I've made many of those same mistakes myself already. A flip that should have taken a month, taking 3+.
We've had ones take 3 years.
Okay, so
some of the worst ones.
Yeah, that's rough.
Permitting issues. Yeah, that's why with a newer house, if you're doing a roof permit and everything else is cosmetic, you're not pulling a bunch of permits, you don't have permit risk.
Yeah.
So we really have thought about what we're going to rehab. Permit risk is one of the biggest, because it's such outside. During COVID in Miami, we had several rehab, no inspectors for almost 2 years.
Wow.
So what are you going to do? Sit around and pay hard money or private money costs for 2 years, waiting for the inspector to show up?
Good grief. Yeah.
So some houses were just renovated and put on the market because you couldn't sit around for 2 years.
No option. Yeah. Wow. You're not just buying in like Florida, local.
We typically target Florida, but going back to, because I try to be consistent in what I'm saying. We bought 2 packages from a distressed seller in Florida and found out, well, we asked better questions, get better answers. I said, do you have anything more? I asked the broker. They said, well, they have stuff in Ohio. I said, well, the seller has a problem and the price was commensurate in Florida. I'll take a swing at the bat.
Yeah.
I've been actually 8 months on that deal. I think we're finally coming to terms, but bigger deal, bigger reward. And, there's a couple hundred assets there. So,
yeah.
But I chased the seller, not the location on that particular one.
Okay. I was going to ask, like, how do you factor in now? Because you mentioned even, properties that are distant require some boots on the ground sometimes, especially if they're lower quality. So
well, good question. Economy of scale. Yes, buying one house in Detroit, Michigan, you're probably going to get crushed. Yeah. You've no leverage over contractors, property preservation, property managers, because you bring nothing to the table.
Yeah.
One house. So you're probably going to pay a premium for everything, which means it's going to be difficult to make a profit.
Yeah.
So we look for, same thing with managing properties, by the way. I don't mind owning a cluster of homes in Detroit, but I don't want to own one house.
Yeah.
I don't even want to own one house in Tampa. I want to own a cluster, because then you can get economies of scale with your property management, bring that in-house, property economy of scale with your contractors, doing repairs and maintenance, and you can create a business around it instead of just paying retail prices for everything, which will ultimately cost you tens of thousands of dollars over the whole period of a rental, because you're not able to get discounts commensurate with running it like a business.
Yeah, that's very good. Very good. When you were first starting out, you mentioned that you were having to run things on credit cards and take cash advances to really get funding. Obviously, now you're in a different place. But what does the process look like at a high level for somebody who's, they're looking at this, they're considering, and they're going, there's no, the thought of getting to the point where they're purchasing large portfolios is just inconceivable.
Yep.
They can't imagine those kind of numbers from where they are today. How would you help them understand what that process looks like?
I think instead of looking at you trying to bite off the whole apple here, you look at this as a village sport. So when we stand back, and let's take the analogy, you got to have a seller with a portfolio. So you've got to have someone that's going to sell you. Mm-hmm. You got to have money to be able to purchase that. Mm-hmm. So that's another piece. You got to have a team to process whatever work needs to get done. You got to have contractors, attorneys, the right title company. So creating this village around you, this power team, and then you say, okay, well, where do I fit into that? And then you pick one area of expertise. Describing what you said, imagine becoming a decathlete overnight, saying, I'm going to become the best in the world at 10 sports at once. Decathletes never started out like that. Yeah. They typically were more geared towards running, and then they would get good at long distance and short term, whatever, or track and field, but they would pick their core sport and then go from there. Yeah. And so when you're starting out in real estate, the simplest place to start out is, I like simple terms, become a deal finder. Because if you become a deal finder, you've instantly provided value to the marketplace. Because then you can partner with an existing operator. So like the pieces are really simple. If you find the deal, the only other pieces you need could be as simple as one, an existing operator or your joint venture. Or it could be an operator and finding money. But typically you deal with the right operator, you only need to partner with one person. Because now you plug into their entire network. And the reason you get access to it, because you provided value by bringing a deal. Yeah. So I think that trying to psych yourself out and do it all by yourself is probably where a lot of people go wrong. Just get good at one thing.
I love that.
And one area of real estate, instead of trying to do 10 different things. I see a lot of people, and I see people online posting different versions of that. They talk about like immediate income versus long-term. Rentals don't make you money today. So you don't start out with rentals. Yeah. Get good at making money. Yeah. Then you have a capital base to invest. But get good at making money. Yeah. And then also, if you can control the supply, then you can cherry pick which ones go in as rentals. And then you can wholesale or retail or assign the deals that you don't want. Whether but joint venturing is a fantastic way, but always the market will spit out people that don't provide value. So try to figure out where you can provide value. The cream rises to the top. We know this intellectually. So don't focus on your competition. This idea of beating your competition, I don't like that. Yeah. You know what I like? Being better. So what I focus on is being better. And when I focus on my business being better, I'll beat my competition.
Yeah. I love that.
And then if you look at it even further, imagine like a bunch of train carts. And the way those links that link them? Yeah. Businesses slow down only based on the weakest link. So the constraint in your business. So you're constantly looking at all these little carts moving down the track, and you go, well, why is my business moving forward?
Find the
bottleneck. Find the weakest link. Fix that. Train speeds up. Now you look for the next week. Fix that. And so I look at business every day as just trying to move the ball forward. Consistency will outpace being the smartest or the hardest working person. The person who shows up every single day, especially in real estate, and does the right things consistently will outpace the sprinter, as I call them. Person comes in and, I'm going to move mountains today, and then they're gone for a month. Yep. Or the person's really smart but doesn't implement. Consistency, and that's great, by the way. That kind of levels the playing field. Yeah. You don't need to be the smartest or be the most energetic. Just show up and do one thing consistently every day to drive your business forward. Make it better, each part of your business. And I look at all the way from generating leads and the marketing all the way through disposition. How can I make something better today? And I try to always make one improvement per day. Yeah. Because that's 5 a week. If you take a normal work week, 20 a month, that's 240 a year. Yeah. And a lot of people just don't, they're just happy with the status quo. I'm not. I want to just make a little tweak, make something better, something more efficient. I've dedicated myself as an example right now. I'm kind of the grandpa in the room on this stuff at 47, but I've dedicated myself to learning Claude because within my network, I got good at ChatGPT, and someone I highly respect who's doing some really good things in oil and gas, he said, Claude Cowork is like way better.
Way better. Yeah.
And so I started that journey yesterday. I'm like, I'm hooked. So I'm going to be on the plane going up north, actually, right after this podcast. I'm going to be playing around with Claude.
There you go.
But it's not playing around because the way I learn these things, and again, it's just me talking to all the other grandpas out there. I'm not actually a grandfather, but I'm old with technology. Is give it a project, an actual project or something you're trying to do. I'm a learn by doing guy.
Exactly.
And then even yesterday with Claude, I was trying to map out a bunch of properties and automate. So I had to pull it from a spreadsheet, sort out the ones I wanted, sort out the unique addresses, sort them out by grading and color code them, and get them into Google Maps. That might sound really elementary to people out there that do high-level coding, but that turned a 3 or 4 hour project into something I did in a few minutes. And I saw the opportunity cost of my time going, okay, check the box, got it done without spending the time. And so I really like the tools and technology. And with 2 people on my team, we're flipping more houses and creating more revenue this year than we have in 5 years with a team that's 20% the size it was 5 years ago.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So, improve on one thing per day. I love that. One of the things that I tell my team and I tell myself is like every single thing that we work on, every single thing, no matter what it is, when you get to the point where you look at it and go, this is done, you should stop and ask yourself, how can I make it 10% better from that point? And it's not done until you cannot answer that. You cannot figure out how to make it 10% better.
I like that. In fact, I've given a challenge to my team as of last week. I said, I want you to ask the question, how can I have AI do this?
That's a good one too. Yeah.
Which is, I want you to work yourself out of a job because you're actually not doing that. When you become a master of technology, you're the most valuable person in the room.
Yeah.
So if you can figure out with every single task that you do, how not to do it, I said, you are adding tremendous value to me. And if you decide to go work somewhere else, to your next employer, because that's what people are looking to hire for. People that know how to harness, manage, use, and get leverage
out of the tools.
How do you become, because let's just say you're making 50 grand. You can do the work of 10 people. You can command $100,000 to $200,000 salary overnight. Because the employer's going to go, for them, it's binary. Spend 500 or spend 200. I'll spend 200. It's cheaper. But you got to getting good at those skills. So I'm really encouraging my team to embrace the technology. I do weekly training on the stuff I'm working on. I just show them the projects I'm working on Claude and ChatGPT. I'm like, I'm not the smartest guy, but I'm asking better questions, and I'll say, hey, I don't quite understand what I'm doing. Can you really dumb this down for me?
Yeah.
And the only dumb question is one you don't ask, and especially with a computer. Like, what if you have me embarrassed about it? It's you and the computer. Just ask whatever you want. Figure out the answer. Yeah. But I'm committed to technology because I believe it makes things easier. It allows you to work smarter, not harder. And I'm a huge fan of that, especially now with a 18-month at home. Like, time is valuable to me. Yeah. So if I can spend an hour at home versus an hour at the office, that's a big, big value to me right now.
Yeah. I think we need to get a shirt that says the only dumb question is the one you don't ask. That's a good line right there.
But I mean that. I only have a few phrases. My wife would probably tell you them and just rattle them all off. But I try to internalize those things because I really think about what I'm saying. I know a lot of people will go out there with all this glorious advice. I try to
That's a good one.
Have a few simple statements that I believe, that I've internalized. And I try to encourage my children on that too. Like, it's okay to ask questions. And same thing in the workplace. Like, I'm here to be a resource. My job, if we're on a ship, I'm the captain. You might be first mate or one of the deckhands. It doesn't matter. We're on the same ship. And if you have a question and it's going to help drive the ship forward, I'm here to be a resource on that. I really encourage and try to foster learning, questions, understanding. I don't want to work with people or them work with me when they feel afraid to answer a question. I think that's really destructive for an organization to have people that are fearful of obviously they've thought about it, they've tried solutions, they failed, then they bring the question. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Bring those questions every time.
Yep. So on the AI front, that's one thing. Actually, literally just recently had a conversation with one of the guys on the team, and I was showing him some of the work that I've been doing with building out some automations and some various things. And we were talking about starting a team wide training, or basically just like a once a week, maybe a little get together where we just talk through all the various things we're doing and how we can continue to level up. Because I do think it is a huge force multiplier if you know what you're doing with it. Have you ever read any of John Maxwell's books?
I have back in the day. If you give me a couple of names, like it's probably some of the famous ones from like the 90s.
He's got a bunch from way back, but he has a video where he was.
There's one I'm thinking about in particular. It's very cliche, the name of it. Oh gosh, I think there's at least one, if not two, I've read of his. But yeah,
he's got some okay stuff. But one thing he said at one point in a video was he was talking about his management staff and how he tells all of them that they should work themselves out of a job and that should be their thought process.
Yes.
To try to get to the point where they work themselves out of the job, because if they can, then that means that that person can train the next person, they can move up. But if they don't do that, then that means that they're probably in the wrong job.
Isn't it so weird? Because people view it the complete opposite, and I try to really encourage myself. It's like the biggest lie we can tell ourselves as business owners: say, "Oh, this place will crash and burn without me." Well, then you haven't set up a business.
You've got it wrong, yeah.
Yeah. So I believe that the tide rises together, and so I believe in training and elevating everybody in the organization. I mean, if you have the most valuable business tool on the planet, why wouldn't you share it with your team?
Yeah.
It's insane to me that people don't want to share that knowledge. And I think you got bigger problems if you share with people and they leave, then that's a you problem, not a technology problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And once again, another quote, I think Richard Branson has a saying. He's like, treat people so well that they can leave at any time from your organization, but treat them so well they never want to.
I love Richard Branson. I've followed him ever since I really in college and really got to learn about some of the business greats I learned 30 years ago when I started in college were Richard Branson, Southwest Airlines.
Yeah.
But I think they've dropped off.
Changed, yeah.
So I think where they got away from what they were.
Agreed.
And they didn't invest in technology. I could pinpoint two things where fatal flaws for me for Southwest. Yeah. They, instead of sticking with their brand and really understanding who their customers were, they said, no, we're going to try to save money and maximize profits. And they did not invest in technology. If you ever notice when there's weather storms, they're left behind. Yep. They're crushed because their technology is so far behind. They're only playing catch up. Yeah. I think kind of talking about businesses and business greats, Disney to me was what Walt Disney founded to me was amazing because he developed it on the back of the napkin and everything fed each other. But where they went wrong is they didn't understand who their customer was. When they started, without getting divisive, they went woke.
Yeah.
Because they thought their customer was the children. They didn't realize the customer was the parents paying for the subscription, paying for the park, paying for the merchandise. And they forgot that conservative base of their actual customer who's paying the bills was actually not in line with what they were doing. And so as a business, I always try to say, okay, where's the opportunity? Check my ego at the door. It's not what I want to do. Let me follow the opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, Richard Branson, he realized the best thing he could do was not be involved in the business and promote the business, even though he had no idea what in fact, if you read, I read one of his books, I forget which one, but it was some version of, this is 30 odd years ago. He got out of a meeting, had no idea. And he would just ask his CFO, he goes, what's the summary on that? Because he sat in the meeting, but he didn't really care. It's like, are we making money or not? Great. Yeah. I'm going to go back flying a balloon and doing crazy stunts because
that's wild.
I'm promoting the business. Yeah. That was the highest and best
value
use
of
his time.
Yeah.
So, and I think that really was inspirational to me because everyone feels like they need to be the smartest person in the room. No, you need to surround yourself with the smartest people.
Yes.
The smartest people I know in business are not the smartest people. They're the smartest people because they hire the smartest people.
I love that.
Entrepreneurs, not entrepreneurs, which is another lesson I learned. You don't want to hire an entrepreneur because they're going to leave you. So the mistake was not on them for leaving you. The mistake was on you not asking the right questions in an interview to figure out if you're interviewing an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur.
That's a great. How do you make the distinction in an interview?
Somebody like wants to work in a team. Somebody, it's like the co-pilot versus the pilot. And you got to ask a lot of questions to get into their personality.
Yeah.
Some people can maintain a business, but they can't start a business. I mean, you got Elon Musk. I mean, I was watching something online with him yesterday. I'm just mesmerized by this guy. I just think like he's so smart business-wise.
Yeah.
He said, you know what? The problem is with data centers, he goes, everyone's trying to build them on Earth, but the electricity costs are killing us. He goes, I'm going to build them on the moon and power it with the sun and get free power and not have to pay for all the cooling. Like, this guy is light years ahead of everybody.
Yeah.
So he's just placating us all with like trips around the dark side of the moon and like all the stuff that we like, ooh, everyone's nerding out.
Yeah.
He's like, no, I'm building my data centers
up
there.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to pay a dime for electricity because I have the Earth's sun, like the solar system, like the sun powering it, and I don't have to cool it and pay for all of this crazy nonsense. Yeah. Power's for free, no cooling required.
Yeah.
So now they can probably reduce these things down, I don't know, 80, 90, 100, 99% at the size and crush the competition.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to be using his data centers served by his robots, sitting in the cars that are driving us that he created. I mean, a lot of people knock that guy, but
genius,
just
honestly.
A real visionary.
Yeah. And massive visionary.
You know, for us as business owners, we got to take care of the business today, but we also need to have the ability to look ahead. And I think he's a really good example of just somebody who is just ahead of the competition because he's.
I think you are too, for what it's worth. I mean, especially obviously within like the specific discipline of real estate, but even just in our conversation, the amount of times that you've moved within that discipline is that it's impressive. It's very impressive.
2 lessons in that. One, if you're doing something that's not working, pivoting 10 degrees doesn't work. You got to go 180 degrees, which means the opposite direction. So if something's crashing and burning, and so many of us, whether it's a marketing channel or a business strategy, we'll just ride it into the ground. Why are you showing up every day to do something that doesn't work? Kill it. Do the complete opposite. But don't, especially with marketing channels. I see a lot of real estate people chasing PPC leads into the ground, cold calling people, even though it's not working, they're getting sued. Yeah. We had that happen. We texted somebody unknowingly on a do not call list. It turned into a class action federal lawsuit, which ended up shutting down all of our outbound marketing.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've been there, done that.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't be afraid. And then also the other thing people do, they're afraid to put their foot in the gas. If you do something that works, my mentor told me 10 exit, 100 exit, 1,000 exit, 10,000 exit. Exhaust the opportunity. If you have something that works, why? Because ultimately the market will close the gap and catch up with you. So if you're an early adopter, you get something, go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it. Make your money while the opportunity is wide, and then the market will close that gap.
I love that. All right, Lee. So let's kind of start to wrap it up a little bit. I got a couple things I want you to share with us. Can you think of, and I mean, even through the course of the conversation, you've already mentioned a couple of mistakes that you made, but I want to know from your perspective, like the top 3 or 4 challenges or mistakes that you've made in your business career that you wish you could go back and tell your younger self or somebody who's watching this now who's just starting out?
Sure. I think number 1 is set your ego at the door and work with people right at the beginning. Work with people that are smarter than you. You know, I use the analogy, you go to the gym, you're not going to hire someone who's fat and out of shape to train you, right?
Yeah,
someone who looks like how you want to look. Yeah. Say, I want you to train me because I'd like to look like you.
Yeah.
And so you want to find people that have been there, done that. I actually like people that have failed and won because they've got a different perspective. There is no ego because they made it, they lost it, they made it back. So I like people that have failed a couple of times to mentor me.
Yeah.
Because you get that really different perspective because they have a whole wealth of knowledge on what not to do. So that, I guess, my first piece of advice, find mentors, coaches that you can work with right at the beginning.
I love that.
Number 2, don't try to do everything. Focus and get good at one thing and then bolt onto that. But become a master of one thing instead of a jack of all trades.
Yeah.
Third thing, I'd say pay attention to the market. Simple advice. Buy at the bottom, control at the top. My mentor described to me, you're an investor at the bottom, you're a speculator at the top. And I was like, oh, wow, you're right. And then the life lesson, which is overarching for real estate, There's always money in real estate, but you have to be on the right side of the trade.
Yeah.
Somebody's making money. If you're younger and you got time, make sure you really marry the right person, because your success in business is a reflection of the person that you married. And anybody disagrees with me, you haven't been through a divorce and you haven't married the wrong person. You haven't made that bad choice. And so that's something that, after now being on the other side of that, I realized, I should have dated that girl longer, got to know her, would have realized not a good fit. And that set me back probably 15 years.
Wow. Question for you on that. I don't even know if you have an answer. I don't even know if there is an answer for this, but if somebody is in a situation where they're already married and they're considering getting into business, and how would they know if their spouse or partner is going to be an asset or a hindrance to that?
Well,
and how would they address it if or head
you
off?
Talk about everything. I think that, but that's part of dating, right? It's figuring out, are your goals, your interests, your values, are they aligned? And part of that discussion is, here's what I'd like to accomplish in business. Have those conversations up front. They're a lot easier up front when everybody can say no. Yeah. And depending on, your religious beliefs, if you're married, you're kind of stuck depending on how you view that. Yeah. And so, which is terrible to say, by the way, but and a lot of people will believe that to be the case. So I just encourage you, everybody out there, just have the hard conversations up front. My father told me a piece of advice, which I unfortunately ignored. This was many, many years ago. He said, when you're dating somebody, look at the worst quality they have and imagine that being 10 times worse. If you're still okay with it, you should marry them. If not, run a mile. And
that's good advice.
Because he was trying to say that people get relaxed when they get married, and whatever that worst quality will become exaggerated.
Yep.
And I will say, my father, who passed away 5 years ago, still the smartest guy in the room that I know.
Yeah.
Smartest guy in the room. He still talks to me every day in the back of my mind with life lessons.
That's amazing.
And he's probably batting 90%. Most of what he said was right on point.
That's awesome. That is awesome. All right. Well, on that, Lee, what do you want to say? Do you have anything to kind of tell the audience about your business? How can they get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Yeah. I've really simplified my platform at this point. It's dodealswithlee.com. And the whole platform, the hub, is deals, because I want to be known as a person that's doing deals. I'm not out teaching theory or something I read on ChatGPT or Claude wrote for me. It's deals in the trenches, tactical advice. So you go to dodealswithlee.com. You can learn how to do a deal. I do free trainings about once a month. You can just submit a deal. We can do it together. I can tell you yes or no if that's something I think we can make money on. You want to do personalized coaching, we can do that. Or you want to fund a deal, you can connect with me and you can fund one of the deals we do. But it's all around doing deals. At Real Lee Kearney on Instagram, really easy to find me. It's not hard at all. I mean, probably... Yeah, between my name, phone number, it's really easy to find me. But doing deals, I believe in that. Not only doing deals, but doing deals the right way.
Yep.
And just teaching people how to structure deals. And sometimes I pull deals that are not even deals. People don't even realize that they have a deal, and I'm able to help them work through how to monetize that deal. But also the opposite is true. I've learned now in business, my second favorite answer is no. And so I'm not afraid to tell people right from, there's no deal there. There's no deal ever. Any way you cut it, it's not a deal. Yeah. So don't try to force it. Just move on to the next opportunity.
That's really good. Well, awesome. Lee, this has been great. Genuinely. I've absolutely loved having you in the studio. Thank you for joining. And
thank you for having me, by the way.
Oh, anytime. Hey,
everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe. And if you enjoy content like this, sign up for our email list where you get weekly blog posts and reminders of our upcoming podcast episodes.